in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. So glad that you are with us this week. And as always, it's another busy week here on the broadcast. Frank Vernuccio, Guy Wehman, and Ben Brunson, who is in the center middle as always. How you doing today there, Ben?
I'm doing just great, Guy. It is a pleasure to be with you and Frank once again.
All right. And Frank, how you doing up there?
Doing well. Great to be with you both. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in again.
All right. Thank you so much there, Frank, for those little introductory comments, and Ben, to you as well. All right. In our pre-production notes here, Frank and Ben, we both have all mentioned it, all three. The First Amendment is really under assault right now, isn't it, Frank?
Well, it certainly is. But this is not something that has occurred suddenly. For about 2 generations of college students, they have, and their professors indeed, have lived under a paradigm where free speech is not cherished. Indeed, it is discouraged. Students or professors on college campuses over the past several decades who have disagreed with the prevailing leftist sentiment on those campuses have been ostracized, penalized, and basically told to keep quiet. So we now have 2 generations coming to maturity, coming to voting age, who have grown up in a paradigm that encouraged a lack of free speech. Indeed, a couple of years ago, not a young man, of course, but Senator Chuck Schumer of New York introduced legislation, I believe it was in 2012, into the United States Senate to limit the application of the First Amendment, saying it didn't apply to paid political speech. He gathered 40 votes, all Democrats. Fortunately, it was defeated. The majority of the Senate is Republican. But for a United States senator to introduce legislation limiting the First Amendment, what a warning sign on the horizon.
You know, Ben, the prevailing thought always is that in college you get to meet all the ideas, you develop critical thinking, and then you can come out being your own person. That is long gone, isn't it, Ben?
Unfortunately, it is long gone, and our colleges have become quite the opposite of what they were meant to be, which were just what you described, open forums for discussion and ideas to be debated and to summarily dismissed or accepted, as the case may be, among individuals. We have gotten away from that. It was happening 35, 40 years ago when I was on college campuses, and that trend has accelerated since then. If you are conservative, you have lost your right to speak on campus. And of course, this concept of microaggressions or aggressions due to racism or whatever the excuse, these are all just excuses to shut down free speech, to shut down the free exchange of ideas. It is the most dangerous trend in America because our First Amendment rights are the greatest rights we have as a country. It is under assault across a lot of levels. And unfortunately, it is happening and been happening at the social media side, where you have right-wing speech or conservative speech, however you want to call it, being denied and shut down and banned and being denied access to these platforms on a daily basis. And this is a real issue. And my thought is it takes a legislative response on some level. But in this current environment, I don't see it. As Frank just said, you have a lot of Democrats who are on board with this concept. And when you can have a Chuck Schumer, senator that powerful on board with the concept that the First Amendment doesn't apply to political speech, which is the most fundamental application of the First Amendment you can think of, well, we're in a dangerous spot.
You know, Frank, and over the time since we last convened about a week ago, there was a video that went viral of Bible burnings in Portland. Deeply troubling. It follows along with the freedom of first speech. And even on the video, it says, does it remind you of some of the burnings back in Nazi Germany where they were burning books and Bibles and things of that nature? Very, very disturbing, wasn't it?
Yeah, because what we're seeing now is not a political fight. It's a fight of the entire American paradigm. Look, when you're burning a Bible, when you're burning an American flag, now, under the First Amendment, you actually have a right to do that. But the fact of the matter is, there is a reason why the left dislikes free speech, dislikes the concept of America and its First Amendment and its Bill of Rights. Socialism, frankly, doesn't work. Any place it's been tried, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, North Korea, China, it inevitably leads to increased poverty. It inevitably leads to limitations of any kind of freedom. In fact, the end of freedom whatsoever. If that message is clearly distributed, clearly discussed, socialism is dead. So the only way those on the left in the United States can advance their cause is by limiting the free speech of those who are trying to tell historical accuracies, historical truth. Ending free speech is absolutely essential to the success of the left. And that is why they are so diligent in closing it down, whether it's on campus, whether it's on the public airwaves, no matter where it occurs.
Okay, Ben, I want you to weigh in on this as well, because you saw these same pictures, and you're going to be in agreement with Frank, but you have a little different viewpoint.
Well, look, it is a First Amendment right to burn things if you want to burn things, or burn a flag or whatever. I strongly disagree with it, but that is your right. But that's the difference between the right and the left. I support the right of people to make those types of political statements as much as I disagree with them, whereas, as Frank pointed out, it is central to the left as it lurches towards fascism in each and every case, always, to control speech and to shut down the dissenting voices, just as the Communist Party in China shuts down all dissenting voices. You may not exercise your free speech. You may not criticize the Communist Party in any way, shape, or form. And if you do, you will disappear in China. And now that applies to Hong Kong, too. Interesting, Hong Kong, which was this little bastion of freedom in China, on mainland China, that's now over. The Communist Party has taken over Hong Kong completely. The Hong Kong government has passed arrest warrants for freedom fighters, for patriots, for those known for their independent thinking and their independent voices. Many of them have fled Hong Kong to safety in the West, places like the US, Canada, or Singapore. And now they have arrest warrants on their heads for exercising their free speech rights. So that is the future of all left-wing ideologies. It always goes there, and it goes there very quickly. And again, you can look at whether it's BLM ideology or the ideology of Karen Bass, who was on the short list to be the VP nominee along with Joe Biden. And these are Marxists. They have Marxist ideology, and they would shut down free speech on day one when they have power.
Okay, Frank, let's move from the First Amendment to the Second Amendment. And there are many people, I mean, Beto O'Rourke, he said this in the primaries, and he was shot down tremendously. But now there's another push to get rid of the Second Amendment as well, with all the violence that's going on in these cities, Frank.
Well, I live and broadcast from New York City, where the Second Amendment has essentially been abolished for a long, long time. I've often wondered how it has passed muster. There have not been sufficient number of cases taken to the United States Supreme Court about the abolishment of the Second Amendment in New York City. Look, here's the problem. When you take away the Second Amendment, the reason for the Second Amendment, it has been said, is to protect the other amendments. And now it is becoming a more hot political issue for a very simple reason. At the same time that municipalities are talking about defunding the police, removing police protection from their populations, that leaves you pretty much on your own. And if, in fact, you remove police protection and you don't have a Second Amendment to allow yourself to be armed to protect your home, your family against criminals, well, you have no protection whatsoever. And as the defund police movement gets more and more prominent throughout the country, the protection of the Second Amendment in those places that still have it, frankly, becomes more and more important. And in cities like New York and Chicago, where the defund the police movement has become so strong and the Second Amendment has been lacking for so long, you're going to see repeat tragedies, which is going to bring the whole concept of the Second Amendment, I think, back to popularity, a popularity that, frankly, it's lacked in a lot of liberal bastions for far too long.
You know, Frank makes a good point there, Ben. And what is happening is that there's people in America, they're seeing what's happening in Seattle, Portland, Chicago, Minneapolis, if you want to even put that in there, New York City, in these big cities. And they're saying, you know what, if the police are not going to be able to protect us, if they're defunding the police, I'm going to be able to protect myself and I'm going to get my own weapon. And now that's, I believe, the thinking of greater Americans. What do you think about that, Ben?
Well, the stats back up what you're saying. There's been an explosion of people buying weapons, first-time buyers, people applying for gun ownership rights, filling out the paperwork that is required when you go into a store and buy a gun from someone who owns a federal firearms license. There's been an explosion of concealed carry permit applications across the country, and it's happening really across the spectrum. It's very difficult to buy ammunition right now. The cost of ammunition is up significantly from a year ago because of the demand for ammunition. So people are exercising the right. It is the Second Amendment for a reason. It is fundamental. It is one of the key rights that distinguishes us from the rest of the world. It exists for two reasons: not only the inherent right of self-defense, which everyone has and is enshrined in our entire writings of our founding fathers, but to ensure that the populace has a way to fight back against tyrannical government. The Second Amendment has that very specific ideology is behind it. In other words, the framers who fought a revolution against tyranny, against a tyrannical government, a rebellion against that, wanted actually to make sure that the people always had that right. And that is part of why the Second Amendment is there. And so it is critical for our country. And unfortunately, you have cities like Chicago and New York where it is very difficult, in LA, very difficult to exercise your Second Amendment right. The Supreme Court should be more active in allowing citizens everywhere to be able to exercise that right.
Frank, I have seen some articles and some people have sent me emails about different situations in different cities about militias. In other words, this is now, this is not the United States, but these are people in the various communities that they're starting to form these little militias that saying, we have word of Antifa possibly coming in, and we're going to form a group of people that's going to defend our city or our region or our, you know, the area in which they live. Are you hearing some of the same things up there, Frank?
Well, I don't think so much it's the formation of a formal militia as it is almost a Minuteman concept.
Yeah.
Where when a demonstration or a riot is about to occur in a community, people are banding together. I will give you one very personal and salient example. My home is about 4 blocks from the main commercial area. It's a sort of a suburban area within New York City. On the commercial avenue, the Black Lives Matter group formed a protest march, and they started smashing in windows. Even it's a middle-class neighborhood, not really used to that type of demonstration. When word came out about what was going on the commercial avenue, the homeowners in the area gathered sort of at a small local store. Some of them were armed, some of them were not. And lo and behold, the Black Lives Matter protesters decided not to come into the residential area after word of the homeowners banding together to discourage, shall we say, that event from occurring. I think that is what you're going to see more and more throughout the country. And again, it grows more prominent as the defund the police movement it's more widespread. Now, there's one other point that we have to go into, and I think this is fascinating. In cities like Minneapolis, which has voted to defund their police department, the same politicians who voted to cut funds from the police department voted to increase funds for their own personal protection, saying, I guess we're elected officials, we need this. Isn't it fascinating that those politicians and those celebrities as well, who talk about taking away gun rights, who talk about limiting the Second Amendment or abolishing the Second Amendment, are also the same ones who either vote for more funds for the public to pay for their personal protection or have the resources to hire private armed security. Talk about a level of hypocrisy.
That was Frank Vernuccio. He's with the American Analysis of News and Media. You can find him at usagovpolicy.com. Ben Brunson, you can find Ben at benbrunson.com, amazon.com, the author of the Falstaff, Enigma, and Esther Sling. We're on affiliates across the country and AUN TV. We're going to be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.